Hello and welcome to my video. Before we get started, I just want to show you where the venue is if you come here to learn to paint with me. It's a place not far from where I live. I live in on the edge of a village called Brossac, which is about just over an hour drive from Bordeaux. So it's sort of south mid-west France. The people who live in this area call it South France. The people in South France call it the middle of France, but there you go. I just made a quick video just showing the workspace where I'll be teaching and a few aerial shots with my drone. Yes, I have a drone. And just get the feel of the place, really. So if you are interested, please come. Obviously, I know it's going to be difficult if you are in America. At the moment, the borders to France are open. People from the UK can come. Obviously, people in Europe will probably not have a problem. Best to check, though, with whatever you need to look at online to see about travel. What else can I say? If you want to come for August, you need to hurry because the venue is getting closer. It's the last week of August, and so July is going to hit us quite soon. So if you do want to come, contact me through my website. Go to the retreats page. I'll put a link in the box down there, and let's get doing some painting. So off we go. What I'm going to do in this video is somebody commented on one of my quick sketches and said, how can you do that in 2 or 3 minutes? Well, this is the picture. And this is how you do it really quickly. The picture that they were looking at was done on paper, I think, oil paper, a few years ago, probably only about so big. But this one, I'm going to use a big board. This is 80 centimeters by 60 centimeters deep, and it's plywood 5 millimeters thick with 3 coats of gesso and a sanding between each one. I'm not going to use oil for this. I'm going to use alkyd. Now there's 2 types of medium that are very similar here. There's alkyd and there's liquin. There is a difference between the two. I couldn't off the top of my head tell you what that difference is. You'll have to Google that. But I'm using alkyd, pretty well odor free. So far, no allergic reactions to it. I'm not sensitive to oils on my hands or paints or anything like that. So, but it's worth, if you do know that you have reactions from some of these mediums, then obviously you need to wear gloves. So here we go, just a quickie, and then I'm going to scrub it out and then I'm going to paint something new. I hope some of this makes sense, and I'll see you in a minute. Right then, off we go. So, cheap brush, 70mm or 7cm, a couple of even cheaper brushes, really scrubby. They're bristle. Well, actually, I think it's a bristle mix. It's a little bit of nylon in there. So cheap they almost throw them at you as you walk in the shop. And they don't have a long life, particularly the way I use them, because I use them not only this way, but I use it this way as well, and stab the picture. These last a little bit longer. I can usually get about 4 or 5 paintings out of these before they finally disintegrate. And they are so cheap. There's no manufacturer's name. Who knows? Probably from China, don't know. All it says on the handle is that it's 100% wood, and they are from apparently managed forests, so whatever that tells you. So here's my board. As I said, 5mm thick plywood. It's a good quality plywood. Now it's called a kumi. Now that may not mean anything to anyone outside France. Maybe that is just something you get in France, but I don't know. They call it a blonde wood, which means that the wood is basically not orangey. Now some plywood you get is bright orange, and it seems to be the cheap kind. This is the good kind, and it stays nice and flat. So that's got my 3 coats of gesso on it, sanding between each one. You may notice that there's an area here that looks slightly darker. There was a dent in it, so I used some wood filler, and then I sanded over it, and it's just showing through the gesso. It won't matter by the time I get the paint on it. And I see the camera went out of focus then. That's interesting. I wonder why that happened. Autofocus, of course, but I don't know what I did to make it go out of focus. Maybe it's me moving. Yeah, that's interesting, because I moved too quickly. I'll look into that, and I'll keep my eye on it just in case something is going wrong here. Don't think so though. Now, plastic plate, brown, red ochre, green, sap green, and a lump of alkyd. I'm not speeding this up. And oh yes, here's something people want to know. They want to know how much alkyd or oil I use to the paint. Well, it's very difficult to say. The only thing I can say is that it doesn't drip. It does not drip off the brush. It's static. Maybe that's the word. So I'm aiming for a brown with a slight hint of green colour. Basically sludge. It's what I call sludge anyway. So if you can remember what the painting that I showed you earlier on looked like, it's basically a tree here, and a sort of view in the middle and a path. So I'm just going to sort of see what happens here, and I'll do it as quickly as I can. So I'm going to keep it smallish. I'm going to sort of that'll be the top and the sides. So it's going to fit in that sort of area. Hope you can see that. So here we go. This is very, very loose. And there's a tree on the left-hand side, the beginnings of a tree. The tree is the light bit, not the dark bit. The dark bit is going to change. That's going to come across here. And I know it looks like I'm basically painting just a dark shape here. Well, that's because I am. Let me just remove something from my palette, which is rattling. So that, believe it or not, will be the landscape. This on the right-hand side will be another tree, the light area. The dark is there just as a tone for now. And then down here, a little bit of a path will come across there. It's sort of vaguely looking like something. There we are, bit of tone in the sky. And then I'm going to use these things, which is basically, now, an American contacted me and said, what is kitchen paper? Well, it's paper that you have in the kitchen to clean things. So paper towel is probably the best way to describe that. So here's my land, there's my tree, the light bits, and this in here, this tone is the sky. This is a very, very quick way of producing a little sort of slightly vignetted landscape. There's going to be a break in the tree here so you can see a bit of sky through it. And then over here, just some texture. I'll be putting on more paint in a minute. For now, what I want to do before I do anything more on the trees is establish my sky. So, how's that looking? Looks a mess, doesn't it? Well, that's to be expected. Everything that I do starts as a mess and hopefully ends up looking like something that isn't a mess. So there's my sky tone here. Just need to get a little bit more alkyd. Comes in a bottle this size. You can buy a great big can of the stuff. It's not cheap, but it's actually quite fun to paint with because it dries so fast. It's usually about 5 hours. So yeah, I'm just going to shove a little bit in there, just for a bit of interesting sky. Okay, that's to be worked on in a minute. Bit more with the paper. Light horizon, getting slightly darker. Bit of a sky shape here. I might even lighten that down in a minute, not sure yet. I never really know until the paint starts to actually hit the surface. So through there, I think I will just strengthen that edge a little bit, right up to the edge of the tree. And now, in fact, I'm going to paint some of the, well, it's not detail. It'll look detailed, but it's not going to be detail. I just want some shapes in the wood. So a little bit down there, and then I'll firm up what's going to happen to the tree over here. So a little dark bit down the edge, and I'll be putting foliage on a little later as I go. It looks sometimes as I work as if I make a shape, for instance the tree on the right there, in a light colour, and then I obliterate it. That's normal for me. It's just the way I work. I'm just establishing some shapes in my mind. And I think we'll just have the wood turning slightly green at the bottom. Just chuck on a little bit more colour. One of the important things about painting trees is establishing the contact with the ground. I'm going to actually put some dark bits there. That'll be foliage in a minute. Getting the contact with the ground. You can't have a tree sitting on the ground. It's got to be connected, and it's just one of those things that you will learn the more you paint, is how to connect. I'm going to have a lump of foliage there. How to connect to the ground. If you don't do it, the tree will hover. And I'm going to have some foliage there too. You don't want a hovering tree. There's also, in fact, I'm going to change things as I go here. I'm going to have a little bit of green there. That'll turn into foliage eventually. Okay, nice dark shapes behind the tree. One of the things that you need to get in a painting is contrast. If you don't have the contrast, it won't work. A little bit up to the edge of the tree there, a few random shapes there, I'm just sort of winging it really as I go. Just make it up as you go along. In the distance over here, let's have a little hill with some trees on it. So There's my horizon line. I'll be working on the sky more in a minute. Before I resolve what's happening here and here, I will need to do a little bit of work in there, but it's all very, very quick, very it's quite satisfying actually doing this sort of thing. And then I'm going to bring a few lines to give you a bit of perspective. So we'll have maybe the path will start to form itself about there. So as I said, this is the sort of thing you can try just to get yourself loosened up properly. Get the tension out of yourself before you really start to try to be too detailed. Okay, so there's a couple of trees either side of the sky. Now, I'm not using these little brushes yet, they'll be coming along in a minute, so I'm going to start working on this with some paper just to get the trees to look as though they've got bark on them. And the way I do that is I make a taper like this. Really turn it as hard as you can to get that bit of paper nice and strong and rigid. If you, sometimes also when you're working like this with a taper, this bit flapping around on the bottom can get in the way. So sometimes I just pull it off and then keep that for the next bit in a minute. So I'm going to start to get a little bit of detail in this tree here. Let's have a few lines up and down. It's literally all it is. It's just dragging through the paint to get a little bit of form. And you'll be surprised how quickly it makes the effect of bark. Sometimes I will leave some of the bits here white for the extreme contrasts. But I'll be possibly changing that as I go along. So back to the sky before well actually no, I'm going to stick with the tree. Let's just get a few tree-like shapes coming up through here. A little bit of, because if you study trees, you know, you don't just get no, hang on, I mustn't generalise. Some trees have extremely boring trunks. It's just like straight up brown or greyish brown with a touch of green in it. Those sort of trees don't particularly interest me. I like a good texture on my tree, and this dark shape here. This is not tree trunk. This is going to be foliage, but I can't do that until I really decide on what's going on in here with the sky. So I'm just going to push the paint around a bit. It won't be like one of my dynamic skies that I like. It's just going to be just a tone. And you can see as I'm doing this how forgiving oil paint can be. A bit more paper. And I think a little bit of light hitting the bottom of the tree here on the path, just a little sweep up to the tree. How's that looking? Okay. A little bit more light through here on the ground. And certainly a little bit more light on the horizon. So in there, I'm really going to push the paint away. You don't want to do it too hard because the paper will start to fall apart. So just a light bit across there. And then I think, so that it's not too boring, I will put the hint of a cloud here, just a little bit of wiping away, like that, so we don't have that hard line going across. Not all of my paintings have that. Some of them I do have a slightly calmer sky, a little bit of cloud shape there. And I bring it over here, right up to the edge of the dark, so that I can bring the dark over the cloud. And I think little light area there. Don't worry about a bit of green in the sky. It's basically a monotone picture, so you can use green in the sky. It won't, by the time it's finished, it won't look strange. In fact, if you do get the odd bit like so in the sky, that's fine. Suddenly it becomes a bit of tree with a bit of light coming through the foliage. Up here, I'll just give you a quick demo on the texture. Now, if you want leaf texture, first of all, for wiping, you would make the paper like so, nice and smooth here. That wipes away. The opposite side to that has got all kinds of little bumps and textures. That's the bit that you want to use for leaves. So if I just put a few dabs on here, like so, you'll see that suddenly you've got a leaf effect. This tree is still very white here, and actually I'm not going to do a lot to that. I'm going to do a few up and down shapes, just with a little bit of paint on the paper, just like so, and maybe the odd one that goes off that way. A little bit of a branch, a little hint of a branch. And behind the tree also, back here, there will be a little bit of texture, like so. Just the odd bit just thrown in. You don't want to overdo it. Just a few leafy shapes there. And then I think possibly a little bit of light here. And then another bit of tapering on the actual tree trunk. So if I take the dark area that's next to it and I go up and down like so, there's a few strands of something behind the tree, and then I drag lightly over the tree itself just to bring some of that texture onto the tree trunk. So I'm keeping most of the light, and I'm putting in very quick, very loose bark effects. Now that little bit of light there, to me, is screaming for another branch. You probably can't hear the screaming. Could all be in my head. So what I'm going to do is, because some of the shapes here look like there's a sort of nodule there, I'll attempt to zoom in on this as I do it, so that might help. If I put the paper on there, so that this top bit is actually away from the picture, the bit that's going to contact the picture to start with is the bit right next to my thumb. That will put in a nice branch almost immediately. Going to get technical now. That's had it. That's the artist's word for a bit of paper that is not going to be much use. It's had it. So, new bit of paper, and let's see what we can do to just make that less of just a branch on its own coming up here, but also a branch with twigs without fussing and painting too many twigs. Just a little hint, like so, just to give it a slightly more complex look. Let's have another one there. Okay, that's coming along okay. Now here, this is like straight up stops and then disappears. I don't like that, so I'm going to break the tree in a couple of places, just like that, just so that it looks as though some of the foliage is coming in front of the tree trunk. And again, a little bit of taper work, and I think a nice spindly branch coming off the side there might look quite interesting. And while that's cooking, I'm going to just do a couple of things over here. I'm just going to darken that area just a little bit with a bit of green, just to give it a little bit more form. And then I'm going to add more of a foliage effect, and then I'm going to bring some twigs across the front of the tree. So a little bit more liquid, bit of brown, bit of green, basic sludge, and just a few shapes there just to make it look less like it did a second ago. That's going to be helpful, isn't it? Okay, now a little bit down here, a few little scruffy bits on the edge. Okay. Right, what can we do here? Let's just make that a little bit more interesting. You notice I don't stay in one area too long. I keep darting about just to make it more spontaneous looking. Little clump there, I think. Okay. So, where are we? Okay, let's have a look down here. I think a little bit more something there. You notice I'm not actually painting grass. I'm just painting clumps of something. Hoping that your brain will sort that out for me. Why should I do all the work? Okay, now down here, I'm going to start putting some more light in there soon. I think a little sort of red, not too much. Of course, if you do too much of anything, just remove it. Remove it carefully so that you don't completely obliterate it, because all these little mistakes in the end will add interest to your painting. Well, we hope they will. They usually do. Now, these spindly brushes, before I get into more paperwork, that you can use these completely dry, there's no paint on that, and you can move it sideways and start moulding some of the shapes that you've got, some of the paint that you've got on the board, into some kind of shape that will conjure up an image in the viewer's eye. Okay, let's just put a nice shape there. I think possibly something in the middle, although I'm not over keen on that. I'm either keen or over keen or not keen. And I was underwhelmed, in fact. Okay, I'm going to add a bit more texture through here, just to get a bit of sparkle in it, a little bit more contrast. Break up the edges a bit. This is coming to an end very soon. I'm not going to do too much on this. This is a how to get you going so that you produce something quickly, and by doing that, hopefully, it'll give you the confidence to not worry about what you're doing. Okay, got a lump of paper there. So I'm just going to pull that across here, and then I need to just establish something at the bottom of the tree to let you know that this is in front of all that. A little bit more green in there, I think. Okay, a bit more in the foreground, a few dark bits, a few light bits. Make them twinkle. And perhaps a little bit more there. Now the thing about this sort of painting is that if you do this effect and leave it to dry, when you come back on it to do a bit more work, you've already got a lot of drawing in your underpainting, so that you can work over this without screwing it up, because it'll always be there. You can paint over the top, add things, take things away, add more colours to it, different glazes, all kinds of stuff. So this is like the preliminary sketch. I'm just going to put a branch up here, thicken the bottom. Never make your branches too thin too quickly. If you look at a tree, the branches are usually the same thickness for quite a lot of the tree. if you make the branches too thin too quick, you'll get that amateurish look that a lot of people fall into the trap of doing. I still want to get a bit more light on the bottom of this tree here. I'm going to pull a little bit of light down through there and then again connect it to the ground a bit more. Just take away some of this paint. There we go. And where shall we go now? I think this one here. I'm going to turn this. This is basically two trees. One tree that forks off. So I'm going to just establish the bottom edge a little bit there, so that you've got like a the two trees branching off in different directions. Okay. And then I think a few more twigs, and then that'll be it for this painting. And then I will basically scrub it out. People won't like that bit. Some may say, oh, it's the best thing you could have done to it, scrub it out. But this is purely for demo purposes, and I'm not too worried about it. There's a branch there, I think. And there's always, you know, if you paint a branch, sometimes the branch doesn't have to go anywhere. Sometimes the branch can go that far and then it's broken off. Why not? It's your tree, and you can do what you like with it. Okay, bit of texture down here in a minute, I think. Just a bit of, oh, this is great, this. I really like this effect. I'm going to show you the whipping technique. You can only do this in paint that's reasonably dark, because otherwise it won't show. And I'll hopefully be able to zoom in after I've made the video to show you what's happening. So here I've got this again, and I'm just going to basically do that a few times. Instant grass texture. In fact, I'll have a little bit over the back there as well. And there. Not sure about that shape. I'm going to have a look at that in a second. A bit more whipping first. Okay, it's looking okay. More texture on the top here, so that the branches aren't all in front of the leaves, because they wouldn't be. The leaves are going to break in front of the twigs and branches in a few places. So. And that'll give you a bit of depth. So I just break that one a bit there. Break that one. Pick up some of this, put it on the tree trunk in a few places. Now that shape here, I don't like that bowl shape that it's making. So I'm going to bring up the ground below it just a little bit like that, just to check that's still not right. To break it a bit. There we go. I think that's slightly more comfortable on the eye. And that's basically it for now. I think. Just a quickie. Just a warm up, really. Just gonna add a little bit of light on that hill. Through there. There we are. So that's a quick way to get a tree effect with very simple clouds, only two colours. As you can see, with two colours you can make a lot of colours. And it's quite effective. It's a good way to loosen up, as I said probably many times. I recommend practicing this, and it will stop you trying to paint too much detail. You paint too much detail early on, you will end up with a picture that is just too fiddly. So there we are. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I won't show you the wiping off, or maybe I will, but I'll come back in a second. Okay, so what I've decided to do, I've got to this stage, and I was going to scrub it out, but I've decided not to. So what I'm going to do, sorry to disappoint those who wanted to see it scrubbed out, but I'm going to paint another picture tomorrow on a new board. I'm going to keep this one and show you how to develop it a little bit more in the future. So I'm sorry if I got your hopes up, but having looked at it and going by past experience, sometimes I'll paint a picture like this, and I've done this before where I've scrubbed pictures out and people say, "Oh, I would have bought that." So being a commercial artist, I think I have to listen to my inner voices. So I'm going to leave this and I'll come back to you very quickly with another video in a few days of a brand new painting. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, hope you've learned something, and if you really do want to come here and learn to paint, don't forget, go to my website, go to the retreats section of my website. The link will be below, and don't forget, August has lots of spaces in it. So it would be wonderful if one or two of you could get here. And for those who also may be interested, I have a Patreon page if you feel that you'd like to contribute to my financial upkeep a little bit. If not, don't worry, I won't hold it against you. And I'll see you on the next video. Take care, and bye-bye.